Welcome to HDTV. You now rocking with your boy. Now, I'm reading an article by Popular Mechanics. It was written by Courtney Linder. Why hundreds of mathematicians are boycotting predictive policing. Mathematicians at universities across the country are halting collaborations with police departments across the U.S. A June 15th letter was sent to the trade journal Notices of the American Mathematical Society announcing the boycott. Typically, mathematicians work with police departments to build algorithms, conduct modeling work, and analyze data. Several prominent academic mathematicians want to sever ties with police departments across the U.S., according to a letter submitted to Notices of the American Mathematical Society on June 15th. The letter arrived weeks after widespread protests against police brutality and has inspired over 1,500 other researchers to join the boycott. These mathematicians are urging fellow researchers to stop all work related to predictive policing software, which broadly includes any data analytics, tools that use historical data to help forecast future crime, potential offenders, and victims. The technology is supposed to use probability to help police departments tailor their neighborhood coverage so it puts officers in the right place at the right time. Given the structural racism and brutality in U.S. policing, we do not believe that mathematicians should be collaborating with police departments in this manner. The authors write in the letter, it is simply too easy to create a scientific veneer for racism. Please join us in committing to not collaborating with police. It is at this moment the very least we can do as a community. Some of the mathematicians include Kathy O'Neill, author of the widely popular 2016 book, Weapons of Math Destruction, which outlines the very algorithmic bias that the letter rallies against. There's also Federico Ardila, a Colombian mathematician currently teaching at San Francisco State University, who is known for his work to diversify the field of mathematics. This is a moment where many of us have become aware of realities that have existed for a very long time, says Jaydev Athreya, associate professor at the University of Washington's Department of Mathematics, who signed the letter, told Popular Mechanics, and many of us felt that it was very important to make a clear statement about where we as mathematicians stand on these issues. The Electronic Frontier Foundation, a nonprofit digital rights group, defines predictive policing as the use of mathematical analytics by law enforcement to identify and deter potential criminal activity. That can include statistical or machine learning algorithms that rely on police records detailing the time, location, and nature of past crimes in a bid to predict it. To predict if, when, where, and who may commit future infractions. In theory, this should help authorities use resources more wisely and spend more time policing certain neighborhoods that they think will yield higher crime rates. Predictive policing is not the same thing as facial recognition technology, which is more often used after a crime is committed to attempt to identify a perpetrator. Police may use these technologies together, but they are fundamentally different. For example, if predictive policing software shows that a bar sees heightened crime at 2 a.m. on Saturday nights, a police department might deploy more officers there. If and when a crime does occur there, the department might use facial recognition technology to sift through surveillance footage feeds to find and identify the individual. According to a 2013 research briefing from the RAND Corporation, and that's RAND as an R-A-N-D corporation, a nonprofit think tank in Santa Monica, California, predictive policing is made up of a 4-part cycle. In the first 2 steps, researchers collect and analyze data on crimes, incidents, and offenders to come up with predictions. From there, police intervene based on the predictions, usually taking the form of an increase in resources at certain sites at certain times. The fourth step is ideally reducing crime. Law enforcement agencies should assess the immediate effects of the intervention to ensure that there are no immediately visible problems, the author notes. Agencies should also track longer-term changes by examining collected data, performing additional analysis, and modifying operations as needed. In many cases, predictive policing software was meant to be a tool to augment police departments that are facing budget crises with less officers to cover a region. If cops can target certain geographical areas at certain times, then they can get ahead of the 911 calls and maybe even reduce the rate of crime. But in practice, the accuracy of the technology has been contested, and it's even been called racist, a cause for concern. Part of the impetus behind the Mathematicians' move to distance themselves from predictive policing dates back to an August 2016 workshop that advocated for mathematicians' involvement with police departments. The Institute for Computational and Experimental Research in Mathematics, which is acronym for ICERM. At Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island, which is funded by the National Science Foundation, put on the workshop for 20 to 25 researchers. Predpol, a Santa Cruz, California-based technology firm that develops and sells predictive policing tools to departments across the U.S., was one of the partners. According to a notice for the event, the one-week program included work alongside the Providence Police Department. Small teams focused on real problems with real crimes and policing data to brainstorm mathematical methods and models that could help the officers. Even creating code to implement ideas is necessary. The event organizers said at the time that they fully anticipate that lasting collaborations will be formed and that work on the projects will continue after the workshop ends. Christopher Hoffman, a professor at the University of Washington's Department of Mathematics, who also signed the letter, tells Popular Mechanics that the institutional buy-in concerned him and his colleagues. When a large institute does that, it's like saying this is something that we as a community value, he says. Athrea says that he attended an ICERM workshop prior to the one on predictive policing and voiced his concerns at the time. Mathematicians should not be building this software or investing in it, he says, noting that the researchers have at times both an intellectual and financial stake in the software. We have been a part of these really problematic institutions, and this is a moment for us to reflect and decide that we're not going to do this as a community. We're not going to collaborate with organizations that are killing people. Accounting for bias. The researchers take particular issue with Predpol, the high-profile company that helped put on the ICERM workshop, claiming in the letter that its technology creates racist feedback loops. In other words, they believe that the software doesn't help to predict future crime, but instead reinforces the biases of the officers. But CEO Brian McDonald tells Popular Mechanics that Predpol never uses arrest data because that has the possibility for officer bias. Instead, he says the company only uses data that victims have reported to police themselves. So if your car has been broken into, you might call the police to give them information about the type of crime, the location, and the timing. Police officers might take this information over the phone or have you fill out an online form, he says. Tariq Algab, an assistant professor of mathematics at Haverford College and letter signatory, tells Popular Mechanics that keeping arrest data from the Predpol model is not enough to eliminate bias. The problem with predictive policing is that it's not merely individual officer bias, Agab says. There's a huge structural bias at play, which amongst other things might count minor shoplifting, or the use of a counterfeit bill, which is what eventually precipitated the murder of George Floyd as a crime to which police should respond to in the first place. In general, there are lots of people, many whom I know personally, who wouldn't call the cops, he says, because they're justifiably they're justifiably terrified about what might happen when the cops do arrive. That idea resurfaces in how the software actually works. As a February 2019 Vice story reports, Predpol uses a statistically modeling method used to predict earthquake aftershocks. McDonald says that the same approach worked in predicting crime because both of these problems have a location and time element for which to be solved. However, the Vice story echoes Aogob's concern that some crimes go underreported or unreported, meaning that outside influence could skew the time and location data. Listen to this again. The Vice story echoes Aogob's concern that some crimes go underreported or unreported, meaning that outside influences could skew the time and location data. How prevalent is this tech? McDonald says that Predpol has about 50 customers at the moment. For context, there are about 18,000 police departments in the U.S., but theyre says a better metric comes from Predpol's own website. 1 in 33 Americans are protected by the software. He says that the figures seem so divergent because some of the largest police departments in the country are using the technology. Of course, Predpol doesn't exist in a bubble. In 2011, the LAPD began using predictive policing software called the Los Angeles Strategic Extraction and Restoration, or the acronym is LASER, which it eventually stopped using in April 2019. The Los Angeles Police Department looked into this and found almost no conclusions could be made about the effectiveness of the software, Hoffman says. We don't even really know if it makes a difference in where police are patrolling. Meanwhile, the New York City Police Department uses 3 different predictive policing tools: Azavea, KeyStats, and Predpol, as well as its own in-house predictive policing algorithms that date back to 2013, theyre says. In Chicago, officers use an in-house database called the Strategic Subject List. Until last November, when the department decommissioned its use, the RAND Corporation found that this list included every single person arrested or fingerprinted in Chicago since 2013, according to there. A January statement from Chicago's Office of the Inspector General noted that some of the major issues with the technology included the unreliability of risk scores and tiers, improperly trained sworn personnel, a lack of controls for internal and external access, interventions influenced by PTV risk models, which may have attached negative consequences to arrests that did not result in convictions, and a lack of long-term plan to sustain the PTV models. Just a few weeks ago, the Santa Cruz Police Department banned the use of predictive policing tools back in 2011. The department began a predictive policing pilot project that was meant to ease the strain on officers who were swamped with service calls at a time when the city was slashing police budgets. While the Santa Cruz Police Department outright ban on the technology might have been influenced by recent Black Lives Matter protests, the department had already placed a moratorium on the technology back in 2017. Police Chief Andy Mills told the Los Angeles Times that predictive policing could have been effective if it had been used to work together with the community to solve problems, rather than to do purely enforcement. You try different things and learn later as you look back retrospectively, Mills told the LA Times. You say, geez, that was a blind spot I didn't see. I think one of the ways we could prevent that in the future is sitting down with community members and saying, here's what we're interested in using. Give us your take on it. What are your concerns? Still, Hoffman says there's no way to know just how prevalent the technology is in the U.S. It's very difficult for people to get information about who is using this software. And what are they using this for, he says? A step toward better policing. A threer wants to make it clear that their boycott is not just a theoretical concern, but if the technology continues to exist, there should at least be some guidelines for its implementation. The mathematicians say they have a few demands, but they mostly boil down to the concepts of transparency and community buy-in. Among them include 1. Any algorithms with potential high impact should face a public audit. 2. Experts should participate in that audit process as a proactive way to use mathematics to prevent abuses of power. 3. Mathematicians should work with community groups, oversight boards, and other organizations like Black and Owl and Data for Black Lives to develop alternatives to oppressive and racist practices. Academic department with data science courses should implement learning outcomes that address the ethical, legal, and social implications of such tools. Since the letter went live, at least 1,500 other researchers have signed on through a Google form. Athrea says, and he welcomes that response. I don't think predictive policing should ever exist, he says, especially when it's costing people their lives. So, basically, if you stuck around after I read that long article, I appreciate it. So basically, police have been using technology to not only make arrests, but they've also been using this technology to target a group. I wonder what group that is. It starts with a B and ends with a K. So basically, the mathematicians have created a thing called PredPol, or they call it predictive policing, to summarize it. And they're using this technology to try to get ahead of crime. It's sort of like Minority Report. If you ever seen that movie, they're using something to foresee what'll happen in the future. But the thing is, this technology is being used wrong. It's supposed to help police departments like, let's say, a small town or a small city. They're supposed to use something like this because they don't have the manpower or woman power, if it's a woman police officer, to handle the area. Because you may have a lot of service calls in the area that's real small. It's like if you're delivering for a company and you only have a certain radius to get to. You have a certain radius that you work, but you have a lot of places you have to drop packages off in that area. So this would help with that. It would help make your job easier and give you a better take on how to take a shortcut to get your job done faster. This is what the cops have been doing. They've been doing it for cases like George Floyd or Breonna Taylor and others, and they've been getting it wrong most of the time because you're targeting a group. Now, I've been saying this forever. We should not defund the police. We shouldn't. We should get rid of the police who are bad apples, retrain the other police, and Black people, we need to have more of our kids, our children join these police forces instead of these gangs, and instead of going out there and being with the gangs or doing things like stealing, looting, and all type of things. We need them to go into something productive like helping with the police. They'll have a license to carry their gun. They'll have a badge. And then those guys can teach the cops how to handle Black folks or teach them how to control the area. My uncle was a police officer for, I think, 30 some, maybe 40 years. And he was one of the best cops. Was very fair, didn't abuse his power, didn't try to look down at anybody. So there are good cops out there, even though we've been shown the bad apples. Again, the media, we have to remember, stands for multi-ethnical destruction in America, is trying to paint a negative picture instead of showing positive. That's how they control us. The masses, the Jews and the fake Jews, I call them, and the masses and the pink folk are controlling the television you watch, the media we're on, to keep us in fear. They want to pit us all together. So now the police, the mathematicians are boycotting because they're tired of their technology they're making is being used for the wrong people. This technology shouldn't be in places like Los Angeles or New York or Houston because they got enough manpower there. This is for cities like El Paso or for like St. Petersburg, Florida, or Fayetteville, North Carolina, small towns or cities, because you don't have the staff. But they've abused their power. They found a way to do this to make it easier for themselves. So now we got a bunch of lazy, trigger-happy cops out here killing people, which are mainly blacks and minorities, such as Latinos and Latinas. And they're killing them for no reason. For no reason, because they have a suspicion that something might be happening. So if somebody's there at a time where something happened 3 or 4 days ago, that person could get hurt for not doing anything. So basically, what is your thoughts on it? If you stayed this long, thank you. I appreciate it. If you turned it off, I apologize. I'll try to make a video shorter for you next time. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share this to everybody you know. And I really appreciate the support I've been getting from everyone. Snow A, I liked your comments on that last video. I don't know why YouTube keeps filtering your comments, but you made some great points on that Zuckerberg video. I love how you approached it, and thank you for being respectable. I respect your opinion, Young King. You did your thing on that one. But again, like, comment, subscribe, share this page to everybody, to all your platforms. And thank you for listening. We out. Live Boy.